At 00:15 hours, the dark skies over eastern Ukraine remained ominous. Two Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs pierced through the thin mist, revealing something extraordinary. Faint heat signatures began to emerge. A formation unlike anything typical of Russian operations unfolded before them. Every sign pointed to a meticulous setup, obscured yet oddly exposed. Positioned near a seemingly innocuous reservoir, the question lingered. What was Russia concealing behind it? Why were the heat sources arranged so irregularly? And could Ukraine harness this revelation into a tactical advantage? Join the Navy elite as we dig deeper and unveil the truth. The operation's first significant shift transpired at 00:15 on October 26th, as two Ukrainian La-100 drones soared through the night. They detected perplexing heat patterns behind the reservoir. While flying a regular night path, the drones captured thermal signatures that were anything but routine for Russian maneuvers. Rather than isolated vehicles or minor patrols, the feed depicted clusters of intense heat. It indicated a larger contingent had assembled in that area well before the full image emerged. Analysts quickly recognized that something substantial was unfolding near the reservoir as the drones approached. The visuals sharpened. Ural 4320 trucks loaded with artillery ammunition materialized on the display. Nearby, four HIMARS 5350 fuel tankers contained over 2,500 gallons of diesel. These vehicles were strategically positioned next to a fortified dome-shaped warehouse, a structure commonly employed by Russian units to shield critical equipment from aerial observation. The volume of materials exceeded what a minor unit would typically stockpile. By analyzing thermal data and storage estimates, experts determined that the depot housed more than 583,000 pounds of supplies. This amount was sufficient to sustain a mechanized battalion for approximately 48 hours in eastern Donetsk. This discovery was pivotal. However, the real pivotal moment came when analysts scrutinized the surrounding terrain. When satellite terrain data was overlaid with the drone footage, a fatal flaw emerged. The Russian logistics hub lay directly beneath the Belgorod Dam, an imposing structure that held nearly 80 billion gallons of water. Russian planners likely assumed the dam provided a natural barrier against long-range strikes, creating an illusion of safety. Yet, the very feature they depended on morphed into a massive vulnerability. Should the dam fail, a deluge could obliterate vehicles, fuel reserves, and communication gear in mere seconds. No defensive system could withstand such a force. This terrain insight transformed Ukrainian strategies. A direct strike on the depot would demand more munitions and increase the risk of Russian air defense engagement. Conversely, targeting the dam offered the potential for equivalent devastation with reduced resources. A breach could also disrupt downstream river crossing routes and hinder Russian advances across the eastern front. Geography had given Ukraine a rare opportunity in this ongoing conflict. Commanders understood that success hinged on timing, coordination, and precise long-range strikes rather than sheer might. The decision came swiftly. Preparations commenced for a unified approach that integrated terrain, water pressure, and guided munitions, solidifying the strategy. The operation progressed to its next phase, emphasizing precision fire. At 3:05 hours, Ukraine activated one of its most dependable long-range strike systems. Three HIMARS launchers concealed near Chuhuiv unleashed 6 GMLRS missiles aimed directly at the Belgorod Reservoir Dam. These launchers were strategically hidden in wooded areas to minimize exposure. The crew maintained stringent communication with headquarters to elude detection. Each missile was equipped with a 200-pound concrete-penetrating warhead and had an operational range exceeding 93 miles. Ukraine could strike deep without entering Russian threat zones. The launch timing illustrated Ukraine's commitment to precision over haste. Every operation was conducted with meticulous rehearsals to ensure the missiles flew unimpeded. The launch timing revealed Ukraine's choice for precision over haste. Each maneuver was meticulously practiced, ensuring missiles flew unobstructed. In the initial seconds of their ascent, the warheads were engineered to penetrate reinforced concrete before detonating within the target. This capability rendered them perfectly suited for striking fortified structures like dams. fire control teams assessed terrain elevation, wind vectors, and potential Russian radar installations. These assessments mitigated the risk of deviation and bolstered the mission's overall precision. By merging meticulous preparation with long-range firepower, Ukraine laid the groundwork for a synchronized strike as soon as the missiles breached the border. The GNS link disengaged automatically, with navigation shifting to inertial guidance, combined with terrain-following radar. This ensured the missiles remained shielded from Russian electronic warfare units. Inertial systems crafted a navigational path independent of satellite signals. Terrain radar relentlessly scanned the landscape below. It executed minute adjustments to maintain missile stability even in contested zones. The rounds descended to an extremely low altitude of 45 to 60 meters, rendering them nearly undetectable to Russian radars positioned further away. Flying at low altitudes diminished radar reflections and thermal detection. It also curtailed the window available for Russian systems to achieve a targeting solution. By the time any sensor detected movement, the missiles were already too close for effective interception. This flight profile considerably enhanced survivability during the critical final approach phase, even with robust navigational protections in place. However, accuracy hinged on real-time intelligence. This is where Ukrainian UAVs near the dam proved vital. Unmanned aerial vehicles monitored the dam continuously. From various perspectives, they relayed updated imagery to command centers throughout the approach. These drones cataloged thermal anomalies and pinpointed structural vulnerabilities. They highlighted strategic locations, including spillway control areas and internal maintenance routes. Fire control teams utilized this intelligence to refine impact vectors. This allowed the missiles to approach as closely to 90 degrees as feasible. A perpendicular strike maximized kinetic energy transfer. It also enhanced the likelihood of inducing internal fractures rather than superficial cracks. This strategy reflected Ukraine's advanced coordination in intelligence and precision firepower, ramping up earlier in the conflict. Long-range assaults frequently relied on static coordinates, resulting in elevated interception rates. By late 2025, Ukraine had honed synchronized targeting methods. UAV reconnaissance and elevation mapping enabled fewer missiles to inflict greater damage, substantially reducing overall costs. These advancements compelled Russia to disperse air defenses over broader areas. This strategy stretched their protective coverage, reducing local concentration. With optimized angles and synchronized intelligence, the missiles drew near to the reservoir. The final obstacle remained: the Russian air defenses stationed near the dam. Despite autonomous navigation and low-level flying, the closing seconds still posed significant risk. Russian systems could intercept rapid-moving targets if they received early warnings. Ukraine recognized that a single fortunate radar sweep could instigate a defensive launch. To avert this, commanders organized a deception operation to divert Russian crews' attention. The timing had to be immaculate for the decoys to achieve effectiveness. If they arrived prematurely, Russia could reload. If they were delayed, the actual missiles would face peril. The objective was to compel Russian units to engage a false target. This tactic forced systems like the Pantsir to squander interceptors and shift sensors away from the dam. The decoys served to exhaust ammunition and hinder radar tracking. These fleeting moments of confusion created a secure corridor for the authentic missiles. Ukraine's operators synchronized the decoys with the final ascent of the GMLRS rounds. The aim was to keep Russian focus trained in the wrong direction, and just before the real missiles approached the dam, Ukraine unleashed the decoy wave, completely diverting Russian air defenses and paving the path for the next phase. Ukraine initiated its deception strategy with a clear goal: distract Russian sensors from the dam long enough for actual missiles to breach. 2 UJ-22 drones launched from northwest Volchansk, skimming low and steady towards the Russian front lines. These drones were outfitted with custom modules emitting RF signals. Their IR and radar signatures imitated those of a Neptune cruise missile. The signals synchronized to perfectly mimic the rhythm of a Neptune seeker, a stark reminder of what Russia had learned to dread since 2022. Russian radar crews were already on high alert after relentless Ukrainian assaults. Winter conditions brought poor visibility and frequent false alarms, making target identification a monumental challenge. By exploiting these vulnerabilities, Ukraine forged an advance pattern too convincing to dismiss. As the UJ-22 drones drew nearer, cracks in the Russian defensive picture began to emerge. The 96L6E radar, which typically supplies target data to S-400 and Pantsir units, detected the UJ-22 signatures and misidentified them. The system flagged an incoming threat matching the Neptune profile, causing a rapid escalation within the Russian command network. Russian operators acted according to protocol, designating the drones as high-priority targets. This forced nearby Pantsir S-1 crews to swivel their sensors. Cannons and missile tubes pivoted towards the decoys. The Pantsir system, intended for short-range interception, depends on swift reactions and precise tracking. When radar data falters, the entire engagement chain spirals into a cycle of wasted rounds and misdirected fire. Intercepted Ukrainian reports of Russian radio communications showcased confusion as crews debated the nature of the targets. Some thought it was just a drone swarm, while others believed it was a Neptune strike, demanding urgent attention. Russia's misclassification at this juncture underscored its air defense system's vulnerability when false signals infiltrate its network. With every second wasted, the genuine GMLRS salvo approached undetected. Once focused on the decoys, the Pantsir S-1 unleashed multiple bursts of cannon fire and short-range missiles. The platform's limited ammunition meant that each intercept attempt diminished its capacity to counter actual threats. By the time the UJ-22 drones were neutralized, the Pantsir had depleted a considerable portion of its missile stock. The reloading process dragged on, requiring several minutes, leaving the system effectively blind and unprepared for new threats. This moment of vulnerability coincided perfectly with the arrival of 6 GMLRS missiles. Ukraine's timing was precise, ensuring the Pantsir was at its weakest when the actual strike loomed mere seconds away. Russian units reported sudden openings in coverage around the dam, and these gaps expanded as Pantsir crews struggled to reboot their systems. Even their close-range artillery faced reduced effectiveness due to being misaligned. By forcing the Pantsir to expend ammunition, Ukraine dismantled the final layer of Russia's point defense shield. This opened a corridor that had not been available at any point earlier in the conflict. The UJ-22 operation showcased Ukraine's evolution in integrating electronic warfare, drones, and precise missiles instead of relying solely on brute force. Kiev is now orchestrating multi-layered assaults that bombard Russian defenses from various angles. The decoys only required misdirection. Survival was not necessary as long as they diverted sensors and weaponry away from the dam. They permitted the true threat to advance uncontested. This integration illustrates Ukraine's increasing familiarity with NATO-style targeting practices, where deception serves as an equal weapon to firepower. Every detail, from synchronizing RF signatures to timing the approach, was crafted to exploit predictable Russian reactions. Analysts remarked that Moscow had become overly assured in its radar systems, convinced they could eliminate false signals. Ukraine exploited that overconfidence, transforming Russian tactics into their vulnerabilities. With air defenses dismantled, interception became futile. The GMLRS missiles entered their terminal phase with ruthless accuracy, turning the dam into the epicenter of a fierce battle. Russia remained oblivious and powerless against the 6 GMLRS missiles that descended sharply toward their target. Targeting the dam's vulnerabilities, these missiles aimed at critical sections, including the floodgate control room instead of its strongest face. The maintenance stairwell, turbine chamber, and spillway valve faced immense hydraulic stress, supporting billions of gallons of water above. Ukrainian engineers understood that affecting these anchors would destabilize the entire structure, inflicting more than mere surface damage. Thermal imaging from reconnaissance drones pinpointed thinner concrete layers and the heat signatures from machinery rooms, enabling guidance systems to adapt impact points. With razor-sharp precision in the final seconds of their descent, Each missile adjusted its velocity to maintain a steady trajectory, graduating toward a near-vertical angle. This maneuver allowed the warheads to remain aligned against crosswinds and sudden pressure fluctuations. The hardened steel casings functioned as penetrators just before the explosives detonated. This dual action generated deeper recesses within the framework, extending cracks toward the reinforced core. Ukrainian command teams monitored the live descent and synchronized each impact within a narrow time frame. This rapid sequence hindered the dam's ability to redistribute pressure between strikes. By the sixth impact, the upper structure had succumbed to deformation. Cracks radiated across the surface. As internal reinforcements began to detach, water surged into the fissures from the reservoir's depths. This turned the internal grid into pressure conduits, accelerating the crack expansion beyond what explosives could achieve alone. Hydrologists later clarified that this initiated a cascading failure. Much like a container bursting under strain, the dam lost its capacity to evenly distribute tension, causing the central spine to cave inward. Sensors briefly recorded sharp vibrations before ceasing operations. These microtremors signified the collapse of the structure's internal equilibrium. Recent heavy rainfall had raised the water level by several feet, amplifying pressure at the moment of the missile onslaught. This influx added millions of gallons of force against the damaged concrete. Russian maintenance delays left minor cracks untreated. These small weaknesses transformed into entry points for water, expediting the breakdown of the inner frame. Satellite footage captured the collapse in real time. The central section imploded, tearing loose from the upper panels, unleashing the reservoir with catastrophic force. Surrounding slabs followed suit as the steel frame warped and fractured. The structure disintegrated from the center outward, all within 10 seconds. When the breach opened, water erupted outward in violent surges. Trapped air within the dam exploded forth, generating pressure shocks that compounded the devastation. Debris swept up in the surge transformed into high-velocity projectiles. Concrete blocks hammered down on fuel tanks, while twisted steel beams struck communication towers. Secondary waves surged behind the primary torrent, striking downstream positions mere minutes later. These waves expanded the destruction zone, rendering rescue operations perilous. Russian troops attempting to regroup were repelled by swirling currents, laden with mud, machinery fragments, and splintered wood. This rendered heavy equipment mobility nearly impossible. Villages downstream captured footage of the flood, annihilating roads and stripping entire layers of soil away. Checkpoints and storage pads vanished beneath mud and shattered concrete. The water also obliterated supply markers and tire tracks utilized for navigation. Russian units had to begin remapping the terrain from zero. Before analyzing the chaos, the combined consequences of guided strikes and hydraulic forces unleashed far greater devastation than traditional artillery bombardments. The breach converted the river valley into a prime demolition site, marking not only a structural failure but heralding Russia's most critical logistical breakdown in months. The collapse of the Belgorod Dam at 307 unleashed over 530 million gallons of water, unleashing a catastrophic wave that surged downstream at nearly 70 kilometers per hour. This torrent moved like a solid wall, propelling mud, debris, and shattered concrete forward. With the Russian logistics hub dangerously close to the riverbank, the flood struck in mere seconds. It swept across the area before personnel could even react. The first vehicles that encountered the wave were Ural 432. Zero trucks heavily loaded with ammunition. Despite their burdens, they were effortlessly lifted and hurled against nearby structures. Fuel tankers toppled as the water crushed their metal frames and swept them downstream. Communications, towers, antennas, and satellite dishes crumbled instantly when the flood slammed into their foundations. The impact was so abrupt that soldiers on duty had no opportunity to issue warnings, creating chaos throughout the entire camp. Once the flood surged into the logistics zone, the toll on personnel and critical systems escalated rapidly. Inside the camp, many troops were on night rotation or resting in tents when the wall of water struck. The torrent ripped through refueling stations, maintenance tents, and the primary communications bunker. The bunker submerged in seconds, obliterating radio equipment essential for connecting Russian units across northwest Donetsk. Initial reports confirmed around 80 casualties, encompassing drivers, technicians, support crews, and guards. The speed of the flood left virtually no opportunity to escape or relocate vital equipment. As the surge progressed, it carved deep channels while exposing buried cables. Used for encrypted communications, storage pits with artillery shells burst open, scattering ammunition across the riverbed. Fuel leaking from compromised tankers mixed with mud, metal shards, and debris, creating hazardous patches that hampered early rescue efforts. When the water finally receded, it left behind a thick expanse of sludge, twisted metal, and shattered concrete that rendered movement nearly impossible in those initial hours. Even seasoned rescue teams struggled to find stable footing or secure routes of entry. With communication lines severed and roads obliterated, commanders quickly understood the situation jeopardized the broader front. As Russian units scrambled to restore communications, they discovered the blackout spanned across the entire sector. Artillery teams lost contact with supply officers, while drone operators were cut off from fuel and maintenance. Forward observers in Lyman and northwest Sloviansk reported unexpected signal failures, intensifying confusion in front-line coordination. Several platoons halted their advance entirely, unable to confirm orders or request assistance. Once updates reached higher command, the extent of the damage became evident. Roads leading into the area lay washed away, and temporary bridges used for supply convoys had been destroyed. Attempts to reroute trucks encountered failure as debris obstructed alternative paths. Lacking fuel, ammunition, or effective communication, several battalions had to slow their operations and conserve dwindling resources. The flood did not merely destroy a depot. It fragmented the logistics chain sustaining Russia's combat effectiveness in Donetsk and undermined its momentum throughout the front. As the repercussions spread across the region, Russia faced a more profound logistical paralysis that would influence the upcoming battles. Russian commanders felt the repercussions of the dam breach almost immediately. When the Southern Military District headquarters in Rostov reported a surge of lost signals in various sectors, multiple vehicles, UAVs, and frontline radars switched to a no-contact status within minutes, complicating officers' efforts to track units or verify supply convoys. This communication blackout birthed confusion during a pivotal moment and compelled staff to depend on scattered field reports instead of a cohesive overview. The primary supply route from northern Lyman to eastern Sloviansk was soon deemed hazardous, plunging logistics into an abrupt halt. This route had delivered most of the fuel, ammunition, and repair materials for units along the Donetsk axis. Once the flood devastated crossing points and eliminated support structures, convoys were ordered to stop. They had to wait for engineers to assess the terrain. Without a secure corridor, Russia struggled to maintain a steady supply line. This left frontline units with the task of conserving remaining resources. Delays in verifying road conditions added to the mounting pressure since engineers were unable to enter the zone. While debris continued to flow downstream, over the next 24 to 72 hours, Russian forces encountered severe shortages. These shortages permeated almost every combat sector. Artillery crews faced a lack of key shell resupply, while armored units struggled with fuel rationing. Medical teams reported deficiencies in evacuation materials. These issues hampered offensive operations and obstructed Russia's ability to rotate equipment. Commanders reliant on predictable delivery schedules had to adapt to the sudden silence from their logistics hubs. To avert a broader collapse, Russia deployed pontoon bridges, small resupply drones, and limited airlift missions. Pontoon bridges enabled temporary crossings but demanded time, manpower, and protection. Cargo aircraft brought in emergency supplies. Although each flight carried only a fraction of what convoys usually delivered, small drones managed to transport medicine and light ammunition to isolated units. However, their payloads were insufficient to sustain mechanized forces. These efforts kept the situation from deteriorating entirely, but none could replace the capacity of the destroyed routes. Engineering units later estimated that re-establishing even a temporary logistics network would require 5 to 7 days if the terrain remained stable. Mud, debris, and unstable riverbanks rendered several paths impassable for heavy vehicles. Reconstruction teams required reinforcement materials before new bridges could be built. These long-term challenges indicated that Russia's logistics would remain strained well beyond the initial 72 hours, hindering its ability to sustain operations across the Donetsk axis. From this point, the strategic significance of the Belgorod strike becomes evident. As the impact expands into both military planning and political strategies, the Belgorod operation reveals that Ukraine can create campaign-level effects using relatively low-cost tools. When drones, electronic warfare, and precision fire are combined with tactical planning, this strike disrupts Russia's supply network far beyond the immediate flood zone, proving that infrastructure can transform into a formidable weapon. When utilized correctly, Russia may respond with long-range artillery targeting dams near Kharkov, enhanced air defense around hydroelectric stations, or more shock drones seeking HIMARS units could increase pressure on Ukrainian strategists. This would compel both sides to adapt swiftly. Ukraine is also anticipated to continue leveraging terrain as a force multiplier along rivers, such as the Seversky Donets or the Dnieper, especially in regions where Russian logistics depend on established roads. This incident now exemplifies how modern warfare is shifting towards targeting civilian infrastructure for strategic advantage. Thus, the question for viewers remains: will this tactic evolve into a long-term strategy, or was Belgorod an exceptional moment unlikely to be repeated? If you believe that comprehending warfare is essential to building peace, then remain with us and subscribe to Navy Elite. Every breakdown we share aims to inform, clarify, and remind us why stability is paramount. Join the conversation in the comments, as your voice helps shape our understanding of an increasingly complex world, which was valued at $13.65 million. Join the conversation in the comments, as your voice helps shape our understanding of an increasingly complex world, which was valued at $13.65 million.